Yeah. I really can't hear you.
Volume's
Yeah,
very low.
your
Testing.
volume is extremely low.
For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was you speaking or if it was someone far off in the background.
No, you really need to boost up the volume. Not really better, no.
Yeah.
Wasim, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Are you guys ready to go?
Yep, we're ready to go.
Metaship, this is ISU ground
Okay.
control. Come in,
It
please.
says I'm louder now.
Metaship, this is ISU
Yes, you are a bit louder.
ground control. Come in,
I
please.
think I was okay to begin with, though.
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah, you were good.
From the metaship, we can hear you in ground control.
Wasim, you sound like you're kind of across the room coming from a mic not really attached to you.
Metaship, this is ISU ground control. Come in, please.
We can hear you, ground control.
Roger, Metaship, this is ISU ground control. We hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. We're ready to go.
You are go for launch, Metaship.
All right. Thank you. Can everybody else hear me very clearly, just to make sure that the volume is clear?
Yeah, your volume is not really there.
So I'm going to speak very loudly. Is that better?
Well, this is what it's like to explore the new frontier. Sometimes
Yeah.
things don't work quite perfectly.
Yeah. But no, Wasim, you're still, you're way down.
I'm still way down. Okay. What I'm going to do is give me a second. I'm going to swap headset and come on to one of the.
If you adjust your mic levels on the dial, what does it show you as picking up your volume level at? Does it show that you're normal or very low?
How about now? Is that better?
No.
What about now?
Same.
No. You sound like your volume's like 2 out of 10.
Yeah.
Oh, you just vanished.
Oh, okay, so I'll go wander around some more. Hey guys, how's everybody? Woo-hoo. Right. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
Just do the wave.
Yeah, we'll do the wave. Let's back up here. Here we go. So we'll start over here on the far side. Okay, let's wave. Everybody go around. Wave. Wave in the middle. Middle, wave.
Yeah,
Over
there we
here,
go.
over here, wave. Up. Okay, now let's go back. Middle wave. There we go, over here. Over here. On the podium, everybody wave. Everybody wave. There we go. All right. Cheap thrills.
Nice. Good
No,
cooperation.
no problem. Yeah, no problem.
Wasim, how are you doing?
Nice hair. Nice hairdo. Like that. All right, over here. Hi, guys. Hi, guys. Sit up here in the cheap seats with you guys. There we go. The two cowboy hats here.
You stay where you are, because you need to go.
I like the view from back here.
Yeah, I know. It looks
They need-
good.
They need to put the moon or something up so you see that opposite. So when you're sitting on the podium, you get a full view as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that would be nice.
Or a space station off in the distance.
That would be nice. Okay, let's have a race. Everybody run around the building. See if we can see how fast we can go.
We move layers in silence. Leave it
Oh, we got the music cued again.
Yeah.
Visions are flat.
Idea of Web3, which is the idea of using blockchain technologies to provide economic interoperability across many different systems. So people often mean just one of those things. I think it can mean all of those things technologically, but really the metaverse is more than any of these technologies. Really, it's driven by culture change and things that we're seeing in society. And at the heart of that is just the idea that today our digital identities that we use to project ourselves into these virtual worlds is now more important to us than at any point in history. So 20 years ago, when I met my wife in an online game, I met her in an online game and we started a game studio together. That was very unusual back at that point in time. But today, people meet each other online for any number of things, not only romance like that, but games, collaboration, social networking. So our identity is really at the core of this. And I think that's what's driving things. So I look first at what is the culture change around all of this. And the idea that we can relate to each other as digital beings is sort of driving all of these other technologies, which just make it easier and easier to do that. That's
And
the metaverse.
with that definition, how would you apply it to space technology? So one of the things we mentioned and talked about was how the metaverse can be utilized to train the next generation of space scientists and space enthusiasts. So how do you see the metaverse playing a part? And also, why not just stick with 2D? Why cannot Zoom just do the same job?
Yeah, okay. Well, we could talk about all of those aspects for a while. Let's maybe zoom the camera lens out for a moment. I think, when virtual reality was originally conceived of, lots of people thought of it as like a gaming technology. And it is, of course. There's cool games that you can play. Beat Saber is a cool game. But games is not really the most disruptive aspect of virtual reality. I think that there's many other things, travel, education, and travel and education are two really good examples of what would be relevant to the whole domain of space science, right? So if we just talk about education for a moment, there's so much knowledge and information that can be conveyed through immersive spaces that are very difficult to convey through 2D or audio or things like that. So for example, when we're talking about physical objects in space, let's just take a simple training example before we get into the whole science examples. So if I needed to train someone how to work on a particular piece of machinery, for example, well, machinery exists in space. Just seeing a projection mapping of that onto a screen is nowhere near as compelling as being able to move my body around a machine, see how the machine really looks from different perspectives, and interact with it the way we have evolved as humans to work with the environment. So I can actually receive a lot more information. I can learn a lot more things. If I then bring an instructor into that context, again, the instructor is able to show me things from the perspective of how that machine works in three-dimensional space. They can point things out, and the bandwidth of communication and learning increases dramatically. From general sense, you can look at things like Zoom and video teleconferencing. These technologies are a big leap in the ability to break down time and space and connect with people across distances and even be able to record information and deliver it to them when I can't even be there at the same time. Those technologies are compelling, but we as humans convey a lot of information many other ways. So for example, hand gestures is a way I communicate, but also it's not just hand gestures, it's how we even orient ourselves within space, the way I'm positioned, the way we're standing relative to each other. Now, these technologies are not exactly perfect yet. I mean, but you can see just even in this, in its limited capabilities for projecting ourselves into a shared space, there's a certain leap beyond what we're accustomed to. So for example, some of the things that I might be willing to do in sort of a video game, like if I were playing World of Warcraft, people are going to be jumping all over each other, they run around, they do whatever. But in this kind of virtual space, more things that we're accustomed to kick in. So for example, you may be a little less inclined to step into someone's personal space because you actually have some of that oral signaling that tells you that that's maybe not appropriate for all the kinds of behaviors that you do. So if you kind of pay attention to that, it's really interesting think about this not only as a socialization context, but it's actually about information and how you convey information and social status and structure and all of these things are at work simultaneously. So in these virtual worlds, with respect to your original question, which is space science, number one, we can bring people together to learn things in a way that they can't do as effectively. You bring a socialization to it, and you also bring the ability to immerse people around machines and complex subjects, whether it's a machine, whether it's a view of the solar system and the ability to look at the way objects actually move in space. So when we're dealing with things that are essentially three-dimensional and based in the physical properties of our world, whether that's our social structures or the objects that make up our universe, that's what this technology is going to be particularly good at. And education and training is way at the top of that. I actually think it's much more disruptive than, say, the video that we're going to use.
And Scott, you recently started utilizing the metaverse, and obviously you've been teaching for, since the ISU started. How have you found the experience, and why were you so excited by it?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Is
Yeah,
my
sound
voice
great.
okay? Great. Okay, so hi everybody. Yes, I'm Scott Madry, or the a version of Scott Madry, and yes, I'm a professional teacher. I'm an educator, and a researcher, and so I'm always interested in new approaches, new concepts, new ideas in terms of pedagogy, in terms of education and teaching. And so I'm always looking for new and more effective ways, ideas that we can communicate with people. And as was just said very eloquently, if I may say, we're in a fascinating and changing time of floods and floods of data, lifelong learning requirements. And so I'm very interested in always trying to see what are the newest concepts, what are the new ideas that can help us reach more people more effectively than we can. As a single person, I can really still only be in one place in space and time, and it's a very long it's a long way to come from the east coast of the US to Australia. And so any kind of new approaches and concepts that would allow me to reach more people, to reach more students more effectively, is something that I'm very interested in. I've been teaching a very long time. I keep needing to find an avatar that has gray hair. My joke is that one of the reasons I'm interested in the metaverse is that, it's the easiest way I've ever found to lose 30 pounds and to look 30 years younger. So most of you won't care about that, but you'll get to the point where that might be a good idea. But at any rate, I'm a teacher, and so I want to find ways that I can reach my students in every generation that I've seen as a teacher, going back to the 1980s. Every generation of students have different concepts and familiarities with technology, different levels of comfort, and it changes all the time. And so we as educators and as teachers, we can't keep teaching in the same way that I learned as a graduate student in the 1980s. It simply does not communicate culturally. And so I'm very interested in not only this metaverse, but other approaches that allow us as teachers to more effectively reach the students of today, but also to be able to contact more people. I teach a lot in Africa, a lot in the developing world. There's so much need there for education and training. and it's just really hard to reach the number of people that you need to. So that's one important aspect, is just being able to maintain the ability to be relevant to the needs and interests of the students as those things change with every generation. The other piece of it is I'm also a scientist and a researcher. And so I deal in Earth remote sensing and geographic information systems and very large, very complex data sets. And staring at these things in a little flat panel color computer screen is quite a mix match. And so this I see as a tremendous capability for not only teaching and education, but for research. I have talked a bunch with Wasim about turning that globe back there into my data sets and have it so I can sit with my students here and we could be able to call up all the different data sets and layers, the different dates of all the imagery, look at the changes over time, look at the processes to in real time process data and analyze that data in the way that you guys are looking behind me. And I really look forward to the growth and development of these technologies to the point where this becomes a standard, normal teaching and research environment. And I recognize we have a long way to go, but hey, that's how you get there. The way you get to where you want to be is you take that first step. And so that's some of the reasons why I'm really interested in trying to see what all this stuff is and see if I can't play a part in it.
Fantastic.
Scott,
Thank you.
Could I add to that for a moment, if you don't mind, because I think you brought up a really important subject as well, which is the ability to visualize and share information in this space. So if we think about the non-digital world, it's amazing to think that the state-of-the-art technology that we're still using is the whiteboard when we're in person. That's the technology that we use to share more information with each other, which is really just a slight improvement on a blackboard. Like, so it's a technology we've had for 100 years or more, whatever that length of time is. In this space, it's going to be different than that. So for sharing information, of course, we've got the ability to visualize information, but dream for a moment and start to think about what happens when you start bringing all of the other technologies that are converging here, such as generative AI, natural language processing. So the future of this kind of technology is that if I'm a teacher and I want to conjure into existence examples and visualizations, here we go. We've got a really cool 3D model right in front of us. But in the future, I would say something like, show me the JWST. And it would just appear on the screen. I wouldn't have to go and plod through interfaces and things like that. The interface will understand what I'm asking for, and it'll allow me to bring it into existence. These data streams that you're talking about, the ability to unify information, visualize it in ways, imagine all the things you could do in Chat GPT, right? For example, well, you'll be able to do something like, show me the JWST in its orbit or something like that. And I'll be able to actually, it'll just manufacture that visualization. So the ability for me as a instructor to be able to convey that in space, to understand the 3D nature of it, the way things move in space and time, and to be able to construct educational material that convey extremely interesting and high bandwidth information to whoever's there, that's the future of where this is going to. And to give you a sense of what it means to actually shape information in 3D space, take a look at something like Gravity Sketch. So there's a qualitative difference to the experience of what Gravity Sketch is, which is it's a sculpting program. It's an art program, but the experience is one of sculpting content instead of simply painting content in a screen. That'll give you a sense of what it's like to have access to a 3D immersive simulation. Take Gravity Sketch to the next level, start conjuring these objects into being by asking for them, and allow us to collaborate in that space. And then the students, if they don't understand something, well, they can they can actually explain in more detail what's in their mind that they're not explaining, and the two people can together get a meeting of the minds about an understanding of a subject. So it's extremely compelling if you think of this not only as a place for us to meet as we are now, but as a place where we can almost imagine anything, go direct into this virtual world from our imagination, bring about subjects and content, and allow us to dream together and to experience things together and start to understand things as human beings better together.
And if I could just carry on from that, the kind of research that I do deals with very large data sets over large areas over long periods of time. And I collaborate with researchers all over the planet, people in Sweden, in Romania, in France, in Africa. And the ability for all of us to come together in a space like this and look at a virtual set of our data, like you're looking behind me, and to be able to interactively look at different iterations, different time series, different models, different kinds of things. That's a powerful tool. That's not playing a game. That's a powerful analytic capability. And we attempt to do these kinds of things on Zoom calls with Google Docs. And it's like having a donkey cart on a dirt road, and we want to be on one of Elon's rockets. And so the other thing I would just point out, I mean, I'm old enough to say that when I started out, we still used clear Mylar overheads on overhead projectors. We called them view graphs. We didn't have PowerPoint. We had clear Mylar, cost about $10 a piece, and you'd have big stacks of them, and you couldn't change them. And that's what we used to do presentations. And then all of a sudden, PowerPoint came along. And some people said, oh, this is great. Other people said, oh, this is just a flash in the pan. It's high tech. This will never last. So education and communication paradigms do change. And I've lived long enough to see some of those changes. I hope all of you guys will also have that kind of experience. But I think we're at a cusp where we're going to see some real in the paradigm able to visualize and share and hopefully understand very, very complex data sets, not only here on this world, but on other worlds as well.
So you can see someone's trying to put all the planets together. And this is one of the things that you have a classroom and you have 30 students. Everybody learns differently. But this environment, and John, you mentioned generative AI. Let's look at that from a perspective of industry, right? The very fact that you can have people with different skills from different backgrounds all come together and really build real life missions and solutions. How do you see the metaverse playing a part in that? Because people often say, well, when is that going to happen? And for me, one of the most interesting things is the very fact that you're in the US right now, we're here out in Australia, and everybody's able to come together.
Well, we as humans, one thing our brains are particularly bad at is conceptualizing exponential growth curves. And that's why I think a lot of these AI-assisted technologies are going to come faster than anybody expects, which is because this is on an exponential growth curve right now. We have more flops, floating point operations on computers than ever before, obviously, but Apple alone shipped a zettaflop. That's 10 to the 21 floating point operations a second. And that's just on phones, right? So a zettaflop of processing power last year shipped by Apple, that makes all computing before roughly 2020 a rounding error relative to what computational capabilities are available on devices today. We look forward another 5 years. 5 years from now, the computation that we all have access to at this moment will again be a rounding error on what is available at that time. And one of the big applications of that is AI, and the ability to train these large language models and really understand what your intention is behind statements. So the benefit of generative AI, number one, is just it's a much better interface to all of the things that we want to be able to do with our computers. So when you want to bring into being the JWST in the future, well, I'll be able to just say that I want that. And more importantly, I'll be able to say what I want the JWST to do in the context of what I'm trying to explain so that I can convey that information. Or as Scott was explaining, if he's got access to data streams from vast data sets, you'll be able to express yourself using natural language, how you'd like to utilize some of these data sets within an example or a visualization. So the ability to rapidly unify all of these different data sets, objects, spatial descriptions, objects in space, and then the ability to convey it. That's a huge part of this. So then, the next step beyond that, beyond the interface, is to use it as a creativity. So a big part of what we're doing in these virtual worlds is shaping the world around us, being able to actually amend and I'll use the gravity sketch analogy. And we're really about sculpting these virtual worlds into being in the future. In the past, it was more of I'll call it more of an architectural approach to things. Build a virtual world, one would start by thinking about what are all the pieces I need down to very fundamental elements. Oh, I need rocks in this world. Believe it or not, when people build big video games, in the past, a big part of making a video game would be the artists who make barrels, who make rocks. You'd make hundreds, even thousands of these things. They spend years making these little objects, and you build up from not only that, but buildings and walls and all the objects that you need to populate a virtual world. Well, in the future, that's going to be less important. It may still be really important for auteur-driven video games that people want to make, but in general, it's going to be a sculpting process, by which I mean, instead of building up from pieces, you're going to say, well, give me this, and this that it gives you that you asked to come into being, maybe I'll say, give me Mars, right? I want to see what it's like to be on the surface of Mars. So it'll give you Mars, and you'll suddenly have a virtual world. You'll say, well, that's not exactly what I wanted. I want to be in this part of Mars, and I want to have a base there, and I want to tweak with things. So you'll sort of refine it down to what you want to convey within this virtual world space instead of building up. And for most people, that's going to be a lot simpler, and it's going to allow you to get to the heart of what you're trying to convey much more readily. But it's all going to be about creativity and these generative tools and natural interfaces and the ability to take those expressions that I have in my mind and do what I call the direct from imagination era of this technology, which is if I can think about it, I'll be able to bring that onto a screen or the screens in front of our eyes, which is virtual reality.
Let me, if I
Scott.
may, give a very, very practical example of something that I can see happening in the future. I do a lot of work in disaster management and disaster response. Work all over the world. I worked with the International Red Cross, the American Red Cross, at many, many levels on disasters in Myanmar and Australia and the United States and elsewhere. And as the population and climate changes, we have more and more very serious disasters, and they're impacting more and more people. And so in the disaster community, and I wrote a book several years ago on space technology and disaster management, we have rooms that we call emergency operation centers, and they look just like this. And we have people who come together, and there'll be people from governments, from the United Nations, from the Red Cross, from other organizations, and we sit together in a room, and mostly what we do is we look at spreadsheets and Google Docs. Think about what we could do in terms of more effectively responding in disaster scenarios if we could all meet in a space like this and have this display that you guys are seeing behind me, and in almost near real time, be able to look at the most recent imagery, where with GPS tracking, where are all the ambulances? Where are all the fire apparatus? And as the data comes in, we can use the generative AI. We can approach these desperately complex problems that we have to face. And, you know, it doesn't do anybody any good if you're a day late. You have to have the right goods at the right place in time to actually try to save people's lives or property. And frankly, we don't do a very good job of that because it's too big a problem. And I can see, perhaps, hopefully in my lifetime, maybe in less than a decade, that we could convert this type of an environment into virtual emergency operations centers where not only can people meet and talk and coordinate, but they could actually see the real-time reality of the disaster response. And we could save huge numbers of lives around the world if we could adapt what this has the potential to do into that kind of a scenario.
One of the things that we talked about earlier on, John, is not just the virtual environment, but how do organizations or learning institutions take advantage of the subscription model that's associated, for example, with the blockchain? And I talked about, for example, having a gym membership. You have a membership that's for 6 months or 7 months, and you want to leave. And when you leave, you still have to pay 30 days or 60 days and not use that membership. Whereas with NFT subscription model, there's a possibility of just passing on that subscription to somebody else. And not only does it keep the cash flow, for example, for a learning institution or a service keep going, but also for the person who's utilizing the service, they're able to then potentially recover their cost.
Yeah, well, if we zoom the camera lens out for a moment, blockchain technology and what it enables, I think what's interesting about it is the ability for applications and software to be created that exchanges value with each other, which is getting to the point of sort of your business model. And that is a pretty transformative thing, because right now, in real life, if we want to exchange with value with each other, if I wanted to go up to Scott and give him a $20 bill, I can just do that, like if we're in person. But if we're online, guess what? It's not quite so simple. I have to go through all these, typically I have to go through all these intermediaries. I use something like Stripe or a bank or some kind of credit card processing system, and through a whole series of steps along the way, with which there will be any number of people who want to take their taxes, either a literal tax or just their ability to extract some money along the way. That's the way the current financial ecosystem works. So what blockchain does is it allows software to exchange value with each other. So again, just like in real life, if I were to go up to Scott and give him a $20 bill, in software, we can now do the same thing. So software can just exchange $20 bills or $20 million or whatever amount of value software wants to exchange with each other. And there isn't a financial institution in the way that can block me from doing that or choose to take a percentage or a fee structure or whatnot. So what that does is then it unlocks a whole wide range of innovation in terms of how software will exchange value with each other. So that would mean, for example, as we have transports across all kinds of different systems. And if I go and I like Scott's hat, for example, and I want to buy that same hat for myself while I'm in that particular virtual world, well, maybe I could buy that and I take it to somewhere else. You could think about like music concerts, for example. So music concerts, part of the experience of going to a music concert is not only hearing the music, it's also being socially there with other people experiencing it together. Guess what? There's the merch tables at the concert, right? So I want to have the T-shirt that reminds me that I was there, reminds me of a specific event that I participated in. Now I can buy that item and take it with me to any other virtual worlds that I travel to. So those are just some kind of basic examples of interoperability, but you asked about subscription models and things like that. So it's interesting to think about all of the business models that will manifest as a result of now I can buy this asset, but I can also transact again with someone else. If you have something that has some kind of enduring value or simply the ability to recover value from it, think about video games, for example. So right now, the vast majority of video games, if you buy an item, it only has a life within that world. And even if in blockchain we create games where that remains true, meaning the item is only really useful in that world, the ability to exchange it with other people through marketplaces that are extensions of that virtual world opens up different ways that people are not only going to play the game, but the different ways they're going to think about the game, right? So if I know that I can play a game and the thing that I have enjoyed playing with is something that I could sell to someone later, I'm going to conceptualize that whole experience much differently. Some people who are game designers, and I come from a background of game design, so I'm sympathetic to many things people but what they overlook is it's a little bit more than the proximal game design systems that you're dealing with. It's also how people approach systems psychologically, and if they approach things thinking about things as things that they actually own, the way and if you own it, the most basic property of ownership is the ability to sell the thing that you own. The way you think about and conceptualize your whole experience in that world, the kinds of game systems that you'll interact with will vary. So then you ask the education. Now I'm finally going to come back to your original question, which is models for subscription and education or whatnot. It's a logical extension of what I was just describing. Because if you have access to a particular kind of content or resource or what have you, your approach towards that material in knowing that it has some value to pass on to someone else later, the way you're going to approach it psychologically is much different. And I think it does expand the potential market for this stuff significantly.
So Scott, we've seen the subscription model. We know what it can do in terms of education. One of the things we wanted to talk about was, at least for us as at the Meta Visionaries, is about giving accessible and affordable access to space and the space economy. And we do that in the form of having a virtual environment like this, as well as building physical space innovation labs that connect people to industries that they think are not associated with space. But one of the key drivers in that is the ability to use something like a concurrent design facility. I'd love for you to tell how you envision that, the fact that a pharmacist can be standing there next to a space scientist and an engineer and an artist, and what they can put together.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so much of the world today, I was with several of the students, as I call them today, and one of the things that we were talking about is after my lecture on remote sensing, the problems of the world are so complex today that they really cannot be addressed. They cannot be solved by any single discipline or any single suite of technologies or any single perspective or system of thinking. And so one of the great potentials that I see in this is this space right here with these chairs. Because if we can actually bring together in a way that does not require the physical travel, people who come from vastly different experience spaces. I work a lot in interdisciplinary teams. And in fact, we have written several papers where we like to use the term transdisciplinary. We have to transcend the concept that I'm a geographer or you're an electrical engineer. And we're culturally, we're different tribes and we don't speak and we don't get along. We're never going to be able to address the complexity of the issues that we face on this planet today and that you guys will continue to face from the single silos of all of these perspectives. And so this space really does give us, I think, a very interesting possibility for what this concept of transdisciplinary working together. And ISU is very much a concept of this, you know, the 3 I's. But I would take that even farther, that we have to bring policy people, legal people. It's what ISU is all about. Engineers, scientists, medical professionals, all together look at the same kinds of problems. That's the hope that I see, that we have to actually address the complexity of the issues that the world faces. And I think this symbol of these chairs around in front of this extraordinary, beautiful globe is a potential future path for trying to do those things.
Scott, I just want to extend even further what you just said, though, because the idea of bringing the people together from the different disciplines is extremely powerful, and then being able to do it in a space that transcends space, essentially, because we could be at opposite sides of the planet, as some of us are right now, is really powerful. But once you're in these virtual spaces, you extend the generative AI, the ability to sculpt things, and you add this multi-user aspect that goes beyond that. Right. So now one person, when one particular discipline starts sculpting information in space using the information sources and data streams that they're familiar with, the visualizations that they're familiar with, the important thing to realize is this ability to sculpt and transform information is not going to be limited to the one individual. I will then pass it to the other person who is a different discipline that they can apply towards this visualization information. So the sculpting is a participatory project. So if you think of a simple analogy, if you think of like Chat GPT right now, well, Chat GPT is single user prompting with an AI, but in the future, we're actually going to be doing multi-user prompting. Several of us together are going to bring things into virtual space together, and we'll bounce it around with each other, transform that information, and get to a better understanding, a better design, and what have you. I think you were sort of asking about what's the opportunity to do collaboration and design. Well, if you think about like what does it take to build a building, right? Most buildings are a lot less complicated than building, say, a spacecraft. But let's just stick with the building analogy, if only because I'm a little more familiar with buildings than spacecraft construction. But if you think about a building, you need architects, you need engineers, you need interior designers to make it look great. You might need an HVAC person who figures out how the air conditioning system is going to plug in. Might even want to see things like, a simulation of how that HVAC system will work within the specific three-dimensional space. So already I've identified like 3 or 4 different disciplines that would go together to design a basic building. Of course, there's actually quite a few more than that in many buildings. You can bring a simulation together, and people from those different disciplines have the ability to shape that space and work on a problem together, see how the simulation affects it in real time as you're working together. Now, spacecraft are, at probably a couple of orders more complex in terms of all the kinds of disciplines you need to deal with, the visualizations, the simulations, and whatnot. But you can really start to imagine what happens in terms of the acceleration of problem solving that happens once you have access to those kind of tools, because you're not only bringing people together, like it's already a pain in the butt for us to jump on airplanes and kind of be in the room all together in one physical location, but then we further accelerate that problem solving process because of the ability to go beyond this very basic whiteboard, which is a technology barely better than, frankly, sticks in dirt, which surely our ancestors had 10,000 plus years ago and were working with. Now we actually work with information that can be refined in real time for us, and that's incredible.
No, you're right, John. That's brilliant. I want to open it out to the audience now. Anybody who'd like to comment or ask a question, just lift your hand, and I'm going to point to yourself so that we can get any questions you have answered. And then we'll actually have some fun. I know a lot of you want to play around and do some of the crazy stuff that Scott is encouraging. But before that, um, any of you have any specific questions about metaverse application and what role it'll play in the space industry? Just lift your hands if you've got any questions. And whilst they do that, oh, you got a question.
Come on.
There you go.
Oh, come on, guys. Show them how you do it. This is how you raise your hand. Okay? That's all you have to do. Just do that. Okay.
And John, one of the questions I've got for you is, we talk about people say do one thing, or you should focus on one thing. How do you feel with the fact that we have all this access and the fact that we can have all these disciplines crossing over? I mean, do we still need specialists, or will it be more that we need to understand how to navigate all the generalism that we have access to?
Well, you need both. Like, I hope I never need this, but if I ever need someone to operate on my brain, like I'm going to want a neurosurgeon to do that. So I think specialists are going to be important in particular disciplines where someone has gone super deep, alongside of having deep domain expertise in certain things. I think that we're coming to a future where knowing a little bit about a lot of things is also really important, because if you think about what creativity within these virtual spaces is and being able to take advantage of it, well, it's a compositional skill. It's not just about going deep, it's about figuring out how you organize a lot of different things together, and knowing a little bit about a wide range of things about the other disciplines that you work with is important. I used to work with a very talented graphic programmer on a game that I worked on years ago. And before he was a video game designer, he worked at a guitar factory of all things. And he told me that one of the most valuable things they figured out at the guitar factory was you train people not only in the thing they're in the assembly line to do, but they train them on the person before and after their job as well. So, if you are the person who has to, paint the guitar, the person who sands it down nice before you, and then the person who like puts the polish on after you, you'd be trained in those things so you could gain an appreciation of what kind of issues those people were dealing with and what important steps. So that's just sort of a very basic example. But I think understanding a lot of a breadth of things, I think we're coming to sort of a Renaissance-like era in which being able to have access to generative AI and creativity tools is going to mean that you can do a lot more as an individual than you've ever been able to do before. You'll be able to bring into being so many more things. That's going to be valuable, but to have the context and the understanding of what you're working with and the people that you're going to be working with requires that you kind of broaden out. So, I believe in the T-shaped human, to use that analogy, meaning going broad, going very deep on a certain subject that you're passionate about, while also having exposure to a wide range of things is going to be important in this next era.
I also think that we're rapidly moving into a requirement of lifelong learning. For my parents, they learned one skill set, and that's all they needed for their entire lives. I've had to relearn my skill set in my field multiple times, and it's doing nothing but accelerating. You guys out there are going to have to relearn your skill sets or learn new skill sets many more times faster than I did. And so I think this technology has a potential to assist in that lifelong learning requirement, because the advancing speed of the technology is going to require you guys just graduating from graduate school and using that skill set for the rest of your life is not going to happen anymore. You're going to have to continually relearn new capabilities, and this technology, I think, can serve a real purpose in that.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's important. You know, I was mentioning the exponential rate at which technologies are advancing right now, and I just spoke about like the exponential rate of like processing power available to computers. The impact of that is also the world is just generally changing on it at an exponential rate, which, you know, it's also going to be hard to keep up with. So just learning one thing and hoping that it will last your entire career is going to be, it's going to be challenging in the future, particular in any kind of knowledge industry. So we all have to learn. The great thing is there's already great tools online to learn so many subjects, but that's going to improve dramatically over the coming decade.
So one of the questions I have is, what does this have to do with ISU? You talked about T-learning. ISU is very broad. We try to teach everybody a little bit about everything in space. And so I'm curious, I would love to ask this of our the folks in the cheap seats back in the back there. What do you think this has to do with things like ISU and the way that we go about our education activities that we do? I'd love to hear if some of you guys have any thoughts or ideas about that. Yes, there's a hand raised over here, Wasim.
Yep, go ahead, unmute and fire away.
Actually, first of all, I'm saying this. I think this opens the door for the children who are in the developing country, who can't reach out or who can't afford to travel through a great university like ISU to have the great learning experience. So this will just pave the way for them to get into the real experience, which they never imagine in their lifetime, maybe. So this will be not like only in the space community or only the people who have already learned and continue to learn. This will be just like open the pathways for the people who never have those opportunities of learning with the experience.
Absolutely agree. So one of the key things that we're saying here is that distance no longer is a barrier, right? The fact that we can give access to those communities who may not necessarily be able to visit those places. And clearly that is one of the key observations of that. And I agree, great comment. Anybody else who wants to tell us what they see the role of, things like the metaverse in something like the ISU or anything related to whatever they think it relates to?
Metaship, this is ISU ground control. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
We have a question from ground control.
Go ahead, ground control.
You guys have talked a lot this evening about the future applications of this technology and what you can see in the industry growing rapidly in the next few years. The question was, what could we use this for right now? In addition to education, I know Scott talked about data processing. What do you see right now this technology being used for?
Got the whole world in my hand.
So John, as Alex asked, what can we do right now? We've talked about what we can do in the future, but what are the roles that you see that we can apply today with the metaverse?
Specifically to ISU and space science and things like that, or just more broadly?
More broadly.
Well, I mean, it's such an incredible creative space. Like if we take a step back, we're using VR right now, but the metaverse is actually more than VR. It's really the ability to envision any virtual world and any screen. So it's also important to remember that that includes phones, that includes computer screens. That's super important, by the way, because just purely from an accessibility standpoint, we've got billions of phones in the world. We don't have nearly as many VR devices, fraction of a percent, frankly. So, until the day comes when this technology is all over the place, we need to work with the screens that we have. And you already have the ability to do tremendous creative world building and creative expression through this media. So for example, there are 3D engines that you can use now. Things like Unity and Unreal Engine allow you to create entire virtual worlds and create simulations within them. That stuff's available right now. It's been developed over the course of the last couple of decades, and anybody who wants to learn how to actually construct a virtual world, well, you could start doing that. NVIDIA has recently been rolling out some technologies on a similar platform they call Omniverse, where you can actually plug in different creative toolkits. So someone who understands how to use, for example, a piece of CAD/CAM software can work alongside someone who's more of like an illustrator or visual designer, an artist. Actually, you can collaborate in real time together in a space that transcends these spatial boundaries, but brings about some of what I was talking about earlier. I was talking about a future that's powered by generative AI and expressiveness within these spaces, but we're certainly not at that level yet. But right now, literally right now, you can bring designers and engineers and scientists together into real-time virtual spaces and at least plug in the software that they're familiar with and see the impact of that software in real time. So that works today. It's something that you can do right now. So, real-time collaboration, and as we plug in more and more of these tools into three-dimensional space and then making it accessible to any type of screen that you want to convey that information through is an available technology right now today.
Agreed. Alex, did that answer your question?
We probably have time for one more question here in the room on ground control.
Hi, I was just going to follow up from your answer there. I think you were talking about bringing in tools so that creative people and people can do CAD and work together, and I think that's great. And I've heard about that in CDF and things like that, and I've worked at some integrated engineering tools. Does that mean, though, if you want to exist in the metaverse and do work in the metaverse, you're going to be tied to one tool vendor? Because I'm just worried, is that actually going to work? How do you see that? How do you see that happening? Are we going to have an Apple version? Are we going to have a Google version, like you say? Are we going to have to play with the NVIDIA tool? I'm just wondering, are we going to see integrated? Are we going to really be able to do real engineering in this space or not?
I think he's wrapping up.
Down there.
All right. So, James, was there? I heard that bit. Was there any more? If you want to send me the question on a message, otherwise, we're going to wrap things up. And I'm going to thank our speakers and then get some music playing and let everybody have some fun.
All right, let's rock out.
All right, guys. I know it's hot. I know it's been hot in this room. You guys have been patient. Someone's created a planet on top of a planet. Amazing. And I mean, this is some of the stuff we can do, right? And that's incredible. And so I want to thank everybody at the ISU for allowing us to do this distinguished lecture, for everybody for being patient when things go wrong and we're trying to fix them. John, you were absolutely amazing. I'm so glad you were here. Fantastic to have you on, and you're absolutely a superstar. And there he is. He's just running around again. Scott, I don't really know what to say to you except I'm glad I know you. I'm glad I know you.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me play. Thank you.
So what we're going to do, we're going to play some music and we're going to have some stuff going on so you can see. But one of the things I want to show you that's possible
leave it all behind us.
There you go.
Visions are flash.
Let's get some stuff out there so you can